The moral and political walls of our nation are crumbling.
When I see the changes, I feel helpless.
What can one person do?
We don't feel like we could change anything.
But as Christians, we have a responsibility for our voice to be heard.
He's going to 50 states to hold prayer rallies and to encourage people to vote.
In Franklin Graham's words, it's a campaign.
He did urge everyone to get involved in the political process.
I'm going to go to every state capital to get the church motivated to get involved in the political process.
What a huge challenge to go to all 50 state capitals in the course of 1 year.
Let's start a movement across this country to turn this nation back to God.
America's in trouble. I've watched our country just digress morally. Christians are being marginalized. As I was reflecting on my life, I'm 63 this year, be 64 in a few months. I just look at the country and realize that my grandchildren are not going to have the same opportunities that I had. There's not a political party that's going to be able to turn this thing around. The only way this country can be turned around is by God.
My dad had this idea to go to every state capital and stand on the steps and do a prayer rally and to encourage men and women in this country to not be ashamed of their faith.
Greta, our nation is in trouble, it's in a mess. And starting in January 5th, I'm going to be going to all the capitals, state capitals, holding prayer meetings on the steps of the Capitol. And we start in Des Moines, Iowa.
The first Decision America tour stop was right before the Iowa caucus.
It sounded good on paper, but will it work? Fear is, will anyone show up? The morning of the event, Franklin called me and he said, "Lawrence, what do you think?" And I'm like, wow, Franklin, given the weather and this first event in the middle of a workday, if we have 350, I think I'll be ecstatic.
I pulled up 3 hours early. The wind was blowing.
There's snow on the ground, it's 23 degrees outside.
I know I had the jitters. I'm sure Franklin had the jitters.
I'm always nervous before I get up to speak. It doesn't matter. I'm always nervous. When we drove up on the bus, and I remember looking out the window and thinking, well, hope somebody shows up. To see the huge crowd, it was an exciting moment, but also it was fearful because you could see God's hand. And I just want to make sure that my stand before God was correct. We had several thousand people out there, and you just sensed right then God was doing something.
Our moral walls and gates of a nation are down, and our politicians are more concerned about political correctness than about God's truth and His righteousness. Well, I'm here today to say I'm not going without a fight. Difference in this country. I want to look at something that happened in the book of Nehemiah. The children of Israel are in bondage because of the sin of their nation. God brought judgment. And Nehemiah writes, the wall of Jerusalem is broken down. Its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. I confess the sins.
Nehemiah confessed his sins to God. He confessed the sins of his family. He confessed the sins of his people, his nation.
God heard Nehemiah's prayer. God gave him favor. And ladies and gentlemen, we need God's favor today.
As we look out on modern America today, we must admit there is a vacuum of the soul.
People have asked me, what would your father do? I think if my father were my age today, he'd be doing exactly the same thing.
The Bible teaches that God will judge any nation that turns its back on Him, especially a nation like America, which has been given privileges and responsibilities more than any nation in history.
A lot of people come up to my father and say, hey, Billy Graham wouldn't be doing this. Why are you doing this, Franklin? And the truth is, you know, that my grandfather was involved in all this. Back then, it just wasn't controversial.
America is too young to die. I do not believe that we as Americans and Christians should withdraw. We need men and women of integrity and Christian commitment who will run for political office this coming year.
My father spoke out a number of times throughout the years, encouraging Christian participation, encouraging Christians to run for office, encouraging Christians to vote, saying it is their responsibility. And in the last number of years, we have allowed people to discourage Christians from getting involved and voting.
A lot of states, protesters can come right up to you within, 5 feet of you, and if they choose to shout you down, that's their freedom of speech.
Right here! Right now!
There was a little tension in the atmosphere because there were some people here that was trying to be antagonistic.
Stop speaking wickedness!
And so, of course, there was some spiritual tension going on.
There's nothing wrong with me. We're fine and beautiful just the way we are.
In my opinion, Franklin Graham is a false prophet.
We should welcome opposition. Now, that's a hard thing to do. I mean, it's easy to say, but it's a hard thing to do. Jesus said, if they hate you, they hated me first. So it shouldn't surprise us. Anytime you have a crowd of people, I can guarantee you, there's going to be somebody in that crowd that doesn't know Jesus Christ. And so every time we stand up, or every time I'm there at the microphone, I'm going to give the gospel.
Jesus Christ is not dead. He's alive. He's right here in your capital today, and he'll change your life. He'll forgive you. He'll cleanse you. He'll set you free from the power of sin in your life if you're willing to invite him into your heart. And if you've never done that, I want you to just simply pray this prayer with me right now, wherever you are. Dear God, I'm a sinner. I'm sorry for my sins. I'm sorry for my sins.
Franklin asked, "Are you sure you've been saved?" I realized maybe I wasn't sure.
I just got this feeling that I needed to repent.
What stuck out the most was you needed to make a decision.
You know, for once in my life, I actually fully believed that God was real.
I'm free. Free.
This tour comes at a time when several state legislatures have passed controversial religious freedom laws.
Ban on gay marriage was overturned in a 5-4.
Why one school faces a stiff penalty over prayer.
After a court told the state of Oklahoma to remove a monument to the Ten Commandments.
The question is, how much will Christian values play into this election?
We're on the verge, as Christians, of losing this nation. And the question people have is, Franklin, what can I do? Well, at this next election, vote. Okay? Vote. Vote for candidates that stand for biblical truth and biblical principles and who are willing to live them. The mayor's races, you know how important the mayor races are? We need Christian men and women running for mayors. How about city council? We need people to run for city council. County commissioner, school boards. Could you imagine if the majority of the school boards across this state were controlled by evangelical Christians? It would be huge. We need to get Christians engaged. 20 to 30 million Christians did not vote in the last election.
Christians did stay home when they could have done something.
My father said in 1976, he said, one reason we've had such bad political leaders is because in some places it's only the bad ones that offer themselves, sadly to say, for office. There are many places where Christian men and women could get the vote if they only offer themselves.
The thing that really impacted my life is when he asked us to make a pledge.
I'd like to have you sign a pledge because this is serious business. We're fighting for our country. Number one, I pledge to honor God at home. I pledge to honor God in public, to pray fervently and faithfully for the United States of America. Can you sign that? I pledge to honor God with my vote.
And he came to the fifth one. He said,
I pledge to engage in my community with God's truth and prayerfully consider to run for office myself. Can you sign that? Well, a few less, but good.
People were a little nervous about that, and so I'm praying along in my heart and asking the Lord if He really wants me to do that. I felt like He was tugging at my heart, telling me that, excuse me, that I needed to get involved and that I needed to consider running for the school board.
I was really comfortable in my own little niche. Running for office wasn't even a part of my thinking.
We're not just to take our light and hide it under a bushel. We're to set it up so for the whole world to see it.
Franklin came today with the torch, lit us on fire, and said, okay, now let's go and let's burn for our city.
What impacted me the most was to not stand idly by. I need to be part of the solution.
The message was clear. Get involved.
Go home and vote and get others to vote. Run for office. Let's take this nation back.